So welcome to our day of meditation online. Today's date is what is today's date? 27th of March 2021. So today I would like to emphasize building resources, psychological resources. The talk today is about how we work with traumatic memories. And so I'll be accessing a little bit of my knowledge as a clinical psychologist and a little bit of neuroscience, and also lots of understanding about meditation practice and the serenity, insight and four heart qualities aspect of Buddhist meditation. So to begin with, I'd invite you to build the resources of concentration or samadhi, so that we can almost like access that power, that strength of samadhi in order for us to cultivate insight. So essentially the day, as in all days, will be following the Eightfold Path. And so if you remember the Eightfold Path, it goes something like having good understanding or right understanding, having good intentions or right intentions, acting in ways that are consistent with our best understanding and our good intentions. In other words, acting ethically. And then we have the foundation for the cultivation of our mind. And we cultivate our mind with courageous effort, with mindfulness and with samadhi. Now, mindfulness, if you've heard me say this probably 1,000 times, mindfulness here refers to remembering to be attentive to current experience. Remembering to be attentive to current experience within a context of good intentions, of wisdom and wise behavior. So it's within the context of the Eightfold Path. And we have lots of areas of being mindful, but in general it's just being mindful of what we're doing. And samadhi means gathering in of attention, bringing it together, gathering it in and placing it in one spot. It also refers to the unification of mind. So there's this one-pointedness with samadhi, but there's also this sense of unification of mind, meaning that all the different aspects of our mind come together and going in one direction. There's no kind of disparate directions, if that makes sense. You're not distracted. One way of defining samadhi is also non-distractibility. So there's this sense of resolve and putting your attention in one thing. So in practice that refers to, say, choosing an object, making a decision that will be your object, like it could be the breath, or it could be the practice of metta or loving kindness. It could be any number of things. It could be just the way your body feels as it sits in the chair. It could be the sounds you're hearing. Whatever the object you choose, you make a decision to make that the focus of your attention. Of course, in awareness, in background awareness, there'll be all sorts of things happening, and we don't try to get rid of them. We don't try to suppress those experiences. We just know they're there, and we choose to bring our attention to our chosen object. In other words, like right now I'm speaking to you, I can hear birds in the background. It's not a problem, I'm aware of that, yet I'm focusing on what I'm doing. It's where I choose to pay my attention. If a bird landed sort of at my door and started to, do quite loud noises or sing quite loudly, I would probably shift my attention to that bird and attend to it, and then see I don't have to do anything about it, and then come back to paying attention to what I'm doing. So this is the idea of attention versus awareness. Awareness, we need awareness. We need to know things that are happening in the background, particularly when we're meditating. And awareness here provides a very important role in being aware of the hindrances when they might start to rise. So we're attending to our object, then awareness might alert us to a hindrance arising, in which case we can deal with it, we can come back, we can decide to acknowledge it and let it go. So awareness has an important role in meditation, yet with Samadhi practice, it's all about attention. That we focus on attention, we bring our attention together, we place it in one spot. In background awareness, we'll be mindful as well of potential distractions and so on. Just alerting us to be aware of that. So I'm saying all this because when we understand this, it's easy to pay attention to one thing. When we make a decision that we're going to pay attention to, say, just the sensations at the tip of the nose, for example, it's easier to stay attentive to that. So things will happen and we'll be ready to know, like things will happen in the peripheral of our awareness. We'll be ready to not sort of get distracted by shifting our attention to those things because we've made a decision. We're aware of it. So when we do this Samadhi practice, we of course cultivate the 5 factors, the 5 jhana factors, and many of you know what I'm talking about with the 5 jhana factors, but I'll remind you. The first jhana factor is initial attention, directed attention. It's like we bring our attention back to the object. We're directing our attention to the object. Initial application is another way of describing it. Vitika in Pali, even though that may mean thought, like discursive thinking, another way you can think about that is as with right intention. Sometimes right intention, the second factor on the Noble Eightfold Path, is considered as right thought, which is interesting. So in many respects, this first factor of jhana, this first factor of jhana being a highly concentrated state, the state of samadhi, in many respects, that is a right intention. We're intending to pay attention to our nose tip. So vitika, or that first factor, is initial application. The second factor is sustained application, vichara in Pali. Vichara, sometimes I think it means examining. It's not as discursive as vitika, one way of translating it, but it is sort of going into it a little bit more. So as far as our attention goes with samadhi, we have initial application, vitika, then we have vichara, which is sustained application, sustaining our attention on it. And it's not a struggle here, it's kind of, I'm going to say interest, but interest is more like those factors of investigation, but it's, we are interested in it and we sort of go into the object. We start to put our attention into it. We examine it. It's like we're directing our attention to the nose tip, for example, with that initial application, then we're sustaining it. And for me, it feels like I go more deeply into the experience somehow. I'm putting my attention there and then I'm going into it. So sustained application, the second factor is this pulling it together, pulling our attention together, staying with the object. And it's not a struggle. It starts to be easier to do. It requires a lot of effort, but remember, effort is sort of this decision to put aside everything else, this decision to cultivate what we're doing. Excuse me. Then the next factor is called piti. Piti, another way of describing that, is rapture or joy. And at that point in time, pay attention to the object, sustaining it. something starts to happen, and we can feel it physically. There's this pleasurable quality to it. It feels like energy bubbling. So that enhances our concentration, in fact, because it's when something is quite pleasant, it's easier to focus on it. So I suggest that when you're practicing, you start to notice pleasant experiences. Just notice them, and they will enhance your concentration. I'd stay with the breath, but notice this pleasantness about it, because it'll make it'll give you a kind of a resource for for focusing even more. The next factor, the jhana factor, is happiness, which is less effervescent than piti, but it's a lightheartedness. For me, I have a place in my body where I feel that, and it's around my chest. Whereas piti, or this energetic quality of rapture, I can feel it throughout my body in various places, and sometimes when it gets strong, you can feel it pervading throughout your body, the whole body. With happiness, it's also pervading throughout your body, but it is lighter, less effervescent. It's just this happiness, a lightness of heart. And that is also a factor of jhana, but you can use it also to enhance your concentration, enhance your resources of samadhi. The next factor is called ekagata in Pali. Ekagata, I think I've pronounced it correctly. And that is, sometimes it's called one-pointedness, sometimes it's called unification of attention. And one-pointedness, we can think about it, I think I explained it the other day on talk, last week actually. I was giving a talk to a group in Melbourne, and one of those participants is here with us today. But last week I compared it to, you know how a hose is kind of, you can put it on spray mode or you can put it on jet mode. It's like jet mode. Your attention's like jet mode. And in that mode, it's very, very powerful. So wherever you direct it, you can penetrate wherever you direct it. So that's one way of understanding this fifth factor. And it gets very, very powerful to be able to penetrate into phenomena, and then, you know, it empowers insight. It gives muscle to insight. So later on, when we apply insight or inquiry to an object, we start to see clearly into it. So another way of understanding it, as I said, is a unification of attention. And in this respect, you could think that there's various parts of our mind, like we have various aspects of our mind. You know, these aspects, sometimes they're thinking about this and sometimes they're thinking about that. Sometimes part of us is meditating, another part of us is thinking about what we're going to have for lunch, or another part of us is, you know, thinking about what we didn't finish at work yesterday. So there's disparate directions that are happening with our mind. When we have unification of mind, unification of attention, it is like all those disparate parts are going in the same direction. You know, they're all uniting, which provides an enormous amount of power. An enormous amount of power to your mind to see into things. So I've talked about these 5 factors of awakening as factors in awakening, but also they're resources for us to enhance our samadhi. Another way I'd like to describe samadhi, you know, I've described it like this powerful jet of attention and also this collected unification of attention. But the way we experience it is like a settling, like a clearing, like a stabilizing. And one analogy that is often used is like a snow dome that's shaken up, and it's all, you know how a snow dome's shaken up, it's all kind of hazy, But then when everything settles, the snow dome becomes really clear and we can see the objects in the snow dome. But the way they've described it, I've heard some teachers describe it, is like a pond that's stirred up and all muddy and not very clear, but if you let it still and settle, it just gets very, very clear. So when there's a clear pond, we can look into the pond and see the objects at the bottom of the pond. And many of you heard me use this analogy before, like say we see in the bottom of the pond and we can see beautiful things in the pond, like things we never noticed before, like our beautiful heart, for example, our loving kindness and compassion and our beautiful qualities. We also see, and you've heard me talk about this before, the rusty cans and broken bottles and bits of 4B2 with nails sticking out at the bottom of the pond, meaning maybe some of our traumas even, unpleasant memories, things that we haven't quite cleared up. So they're there still affecting us, but when we can see them clearly, we can uproot them, take them out of the pond, or at least know where they are so we don't step on them. So I've just given you, I didn't plan to do that, but I've just given you a bit of a brief overview about Samadhi practice. And so today I'll invite you to cultivate Samadhi, and then I'll give a talk. And after the talk, I'll give you I'll guide you in a brief meditation that's based on Rick Hanson's HEAL model. HEAL model is having an experience, having a good experience, enriching it, absorbing into it, and then linking it to something. But I'll leave out the linking component. But in general, this HEA, this having an experience, enriching it, and absorbing into it, you can kind of almost put a correlation to that with the 5 factors, the 5 jhana factors, which is really interesting. And the linking to another experience, I'll explain in the talk, that you could almost put a correlation of insight into that. So what we have with HEAL is a kind of like a description of the practice of cultivating Samadhi and then applying insight with that power of Samadhi. So, but for the moment, and you might notice that happening anyway in your practice. I'll be inviting you to cultivate Samadhi, but inevitably there'll be some insights arise perhaps. When you do Samadhi and insight practice, often there's a shift between insight aspect of it and the serenity aspect of it, even within the one sit. And I'll just remind you, you've heard me, some of you heard me say this before anyway. When I went to Thailand and was practicing in the northeast in the forest tradition, they didn't give many instructions. They hardly gave any instructions at all, actually, other than to say, and I'm just translating what they say, but for goodness sake, they would cajole us. They'd say, for goodness sake, just still your mind, calm your mind, quieten your mind, and then investigate. That's it. So it says the reason why we cultivate Samadhi, the reason why we still our minds, the reason why we clarify our minds is so that we can see clearly and we can wake up to the way things are. So the theme of this morning is Samadhi, building resources. You may notice that you'll slip into insight, you'll see clearly something, you might see an insight arise, then understand it. So don't utilize that, I'm saying. Utilize that with the understanding of this practice of serenity and insight working together to wake us up. Okay, so any questions about today? I'll give you the agenda first of all as well. We'll sit right now I'll guide you into a very brief sit, and then we'll have 2 half-hour sits. Right now I'll just guide you into a short meditation for about 15 minutes. Then we'll have 2 silent meditation practices. You can sit for those whole practices if you want, or you can alternate between sitting and walking. So it's a shift between walking and sitting, if you wish. And then at 20 to 11, we'll have a tea break. Then 11 o'clock, I'll give a talk. Hopefully I won't go on for too long. I can never promise that, but hopefully I won't go on for too long. Then we'll have some discussion, and then I'll guide you in a heel, just a brief heel practice. Then we'll have lunch at 12:30, back at 1:30 for 2 more sits, and then 2:30 we'll have some Dharma discussion. So if you have any questions, about the talk, we can just address those just after the talk. But in questions in general, we can save them up to the discussion section where we share our insights. Okay, is that all clear? Great. Okay, so I'll just repeat that. So the basic instructions will be something like this. You'll ground yourself, settle yourself, bring yourself to the present in whatever way works for you. Sometimes people might link into their breathing straight away and just slow out breaths, relaxing their body, centering themselves. Some people may ground in earth element, and I'll probably invite you to ground in earth element. Then some people like to open their awareness to sounds, letting sounds bring them into the present. Then you're invited to develop your intention for the practice. This is very important. If you develop an intention, it's something that you can come back to when you feel a bit lost in your meditation. You can come back and remember, what was my original intention? Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, right, okay. Start again. Then at that point, you may also make a contingency plan for when you're hijacked by one of the hindrances, what to do, how to recenter yourself, how to recover. Then I'll invite you to just a few moments of one of the 4 heart qualities. Even if it's just a few words, like, may I be safe, may I be free from mental distress, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, free from enmity, may I be healthy in body and mind, and may I be able to protect my own happiness, or may I live with ease is another way of describing this quality, this aspiration, sorry. And if you can't get it for yourself, think of someone else that you can rouse those wonderful intentions for. And just sit with that for a while. And then begin your practice of whatever you're choosing to focus on. So it looks like many of you are already beginning anyway. So.